What would it be like to be an awarded teacher? And when I say awarded, I'm talking about being recognized as the best teacher within your country. Yeah, that's the level of insight we're going to be treated to today by way of my guest. Her name is Katy Whitfield. And yeah, I've got this feeling that, for any young aspiring teacher, or even a teacher who just needs a bit of, boost, a creative boost, this talk is going to be your remedy for all of that. I mean, we talk about a bunch of different things within this conversation in terms of, her unique philosophy towards teaching. We also get into, how she goes about things as far as integrating her personal life into the classroom. And I know that sounds a little bit funny, but, when you get into this talk and you hear the exact way that she's doing it, you're gonna get it. It's gonna click. Outside of that, we also look at notions of AI, how that's gonna be changing education moving forward in a lot of exciting ways. So, as always, I encourage you to check out the full-length audio version. And this is just a YouTube video compilation, some of the highlights, but there's so much more in the full talk. You can find it wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... All right, well, why don't we get into it? I think it's safe to say that we all have this kind of shared vision or idea of what teaching is all about. I mean, yeah, we have all had those experiences, personal, in our own lives, good, bad, or otherwise, related to education, right? However, these conversations that I have, I aim to kind of go a little bit deeper, and get the inside scoop. So I want to start today's talk, or this video compilation, about the role of teaching and how it's evolving in ways that might surprise you. So here's Katy explaining that.
The role of a teacher has evolved and will continue to evolve. And I think that's the exciting part of the profession. I would say that if somebody were to summarize like 5 other words that they would add, I would say that I do a lot of mentorship in my role as a teacher, mentoring students, mentoring colleagues, mentoring administrators, mentoring community partners, building relationships. I would say that I have a lot of responsibilities as a guide. The guide doesn't always have to show exactly the way, but it has to provide the boundaries, or create the boundaries for learning, and create the tool, or create some of the tools, or to engage the tools we're going to use for learning. I do a lot of facilitation of learning. I think I mentioned that a little bit before earlier. This idea of curating experiences for students is part of that facilitation, similar in a way in which like a docent would do in a museum, for example, or a camp counselor would do with a bunch of students playing a game. I do a lot of work as a co-constructor of learning with students. And as their cheerleader, as we go through, teachers have to slow down their step. And I like that kind of idea of like, we're all on this journey. And for some students I work with, I've got to be ready to run, and I'm in a lot of training to be able to support what they need. And for some of them, I need to move at a very, very slow and tempoed pace for them. And I'd say the last thing that I would sort of add is that teachers have a real responsibility, particularly post-pandemic, for creating opportunities for engagement and curiosity. We spent 3 years or 2.5 years engaging students online where we never even could read their emotions. And so part of that is really we've become sort of we've had to add to our responsibilities the sort of knowledge of social emotional learning, and how do you support students who have experienced so much trauma in so many different ways.
Now, one of the things that excites me the most about sharing this video with you is the fact that, we're being treated to an opportunity to really get into the mindset of a person who's on top of their game. I mean, Katy herself is, one of the best out there when it comes to education within teaching. So I think there's a lot to be learned here. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity to get a peek into that mindset. What makes her approach to the craft unique? And how can others perhaps get inspired from that, learn from it, and integrate some of the things that she's doing within their own classrooms. So yeah, have a listen to this clip.
One of the things that has been noted about the teaching and learning that I facilitate is the fact that I take the students outside. And whether that is that we're traveling to a different historical time period because we're traveling in time, and that's like the joy of being a history teacher, is the time travel, whether or not we're then moving ourselves into a different language. I also teach French, or whether that's the idea of like sort of like looking at our civic responsibility and going out into the community and doing stuff, whether that's historical field work or gathering information and then gathering data and then doing something with it. And so a lot of my work has been recognized for that.
Teaching can definitely be a challenging job. We all know this, again, shared experiences. And add in the fact that nowadays you have classrooms that are multicultural, that have a lot of different needs, and that can be overwhelming for a lot of teachers. But here's a clip of Katy explaining that challenge, and also, again, coming back to this notion of mindset of how that challenge is actually one of the most rewarding aspects to the work that she does.
So when I walk into my classroom, I've got 30 different people with the goal of teaching them the same skill, the same goal, to inquire about the same similar type of content, but knowing that each one of them has a particular skill set that I need to figure out, and the challenges that each of those bring makes the learning experience so interesting every day.
Now, I did kind of tease this notion off the top of how Katy blends the personal and the professional together in such ways that really benefit the students. So here's a clip of her explaining this.
This past March, I hit my 60th country that I traveled to.
Wow.
The first country I traveled to on my own was England when I was just before I was a teacher, and to be hitting my 45th year and to have visited 60 countries on 5 continents.
Get out of town. Yeah, it's impressive.
Is pretty awesome. And, you know, I mean, I think part of the learning that I love through my travel is the fact that I have the privilege of being able to do that. And not all my students can say they're ever going to get to Greenland, or that they're ever going to get to New Zealand, or that they're ever going to be able to go to Morocco and walk through the souks in Morocco, or to spend a night in the desert. And so that idea of me bringing the outside into the classroom, and then them being able to have this opportunity to engage with that learning, I think is really important.
You're traveling for your own enjoyment, of course, but also, I'm getting the sense that you're traveling for the teaching in a way, you know, like you're going out, you're exploring yourself, you're finding things like, oh, this would be great. This would be great to bring back in the classroom. I can build this into this unit or whatever I'm going to be doing here. I really like that. And I think that's, again, a marker of what's probably distinguishing you and what you're doing. And it would be great, I think, for a lot of aspiring teachers, or even teachers right now that are maybe stuck in a bit of a rut. Like, there's so many different opportunities to really liven up the classroom if you just sort of put on these different types of goggles and interpret the world differently.
This next clip represents something, an observation, if you will, something that for me personally I've witnessed, and you know, maybe you yourself too. And it's this idea of how everything around us, our world, is evolving in such a rapid way. And yet, one of the pillars of what defines our societies, you know, globally speaking, this notion of education has been kind of stuck in, like, what, 1950s, 1960s, colonial style, you know? I think we're ready for an upgrade. I think we're ready to kind of take things to a new level. So I really want to get into the mindset of a teacher who's embedded within all of this and find out why things aren't changing, and how we can go about, you know, introducing change, that it's going to benefit students, it's going to benefit society as a whole. So here's a clip of Katy explaining this.
And if you're looking at why they're showing expressions of apathy, it's because they're not feeling connected. They're not feeling like that they are being heard. And so part of the call for educational reform, I think, is a need to shift away from adults only sitting at the table to having some young people sit at the table. I mean, if you think about like the learning experience that your parents would have had, or that our parents' generation would have had, and then what we have inherited, it's not that different. It's not that far.
That's my point, you know, like that's it. It hasn't changed all that much. And yet everything around us, our world is changing. I mean, it's changing year to year. Every 3 to 5 years, we're turning things upside down. So it seems, you know, ridiculous that the systems haven't adapted as well as they could have.
Well, this next clip represents a big issue, and it's this notion of AI. What is it going to mean for education? How should we be viewing it? What can we expect? Well, here's a clip of Katy explaining a lot of her views on it, and some of them might be a little bit surprising to you. So I encourage you to really not only watch this one, but have a think, because I think this is something that can really shape and change the face of education in a lot of great ways moving forward.
I think AI needs to be approached with excitement and not with fear.
All right. All right.
I think that, in some ways, AI becomes the great equalizer for if you don't know the answer to a question, it's like, to a degree, it's in the same way we used to use Google.
Yeah.
However, it does lots of other things. And so I think in teaching and learning, the exciting opportunity is the fact that it's a new tool that we have some responsibility of in order to help students learn how to navigate. In the same way that we would have taught them how to use an app on their phone, or that we would have shown them how to use the Google Suite when it first came out. And so I think to a degree, part of it, I think there's two things here. One, the access to ready-made content is one thing. Just even having the content base of how AI accesses that information and how, but the simplicity of a question, I can get in about 8 seconds, a very, very, very thorough answer. But like any source, it has holes in it. There's opportunity for critical analysis. And I think that the 21st century teacher needs to be teaching students about how to look at information, misinformation, the crediting of sources, perspective, where does that information come from? Where has it been sourced from? And I think also, a colleague and I were discussing this earlier today about the idea of you can jump into a different point in the learning when you at least have a baseline of content to start from. And so, let's say, for example, I was teaching my students about Viola Desmond. Viola Desmond is a Canadian civil rights activist, Black Canadian civil rights activist. And if the students did not know who Viola Desmond was, I could type into AI and say, who is Viola Desmond and what was the historical significance of her contribution to the National Association of Colored People? That gives me a baseline within which I can jump off it. And then the students can then say, well, that answers some of the questions that I have, but it doesn't answer all of the questions. And then that gives them an opportunity to jump off for points of curiosity. Now, I've yet to see students use AI to produce any piece of writing. And I think that any good teacher who is supporting their learners throughout a learning process will know where their student's voice is.
Well, we are drawing to a close here, but as always, I encourage you to go check out the full-length audio version of this content. You can do so wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And in fact, there is this really engaging story involving a lesson plan and a tattoo. And I'm just gonna kind of let that one sit there. You're gonna have to go find out the story about that within this full-length talk. Of course, there's so much more by way of insight that Katy provides to, again, aspiring teachers or teachers that are looking for that extra little boost of motivation or inspiration for themselves to really bring out more within classrooms, to bring out more within students. So yeah, do check that out. And as always, check out the next episode of Life as a. I've got these professions covered. They're coming out weekly, and I think they can really be a benefit to a lot of young people, to a lot of people mid-career that are looking to make some changes. So yeah, and while I do have your attention, I would really appreciate that like or subscribe. It would really help in terms of, getting this content out to others, inspiring them to maybe make some changes in their own lives. All right, well, I think this might be a point to draw to a close here. But as always, I encourage you to check out the next episode of Life as a. It'll be coming at you right next week. All right, until then, see you.